right, so you heard him say it. Seems like the team quit on Earl Watson. That early in the season?
I'm not gonna say they quit. It's difficult to say they quit 3 games. I understand what Phoenix, the upper management, is feeling. When you lose your first 3 games of the season by 40 points each game or more, that's tough. And they have a young team, and those guys, they don't understand the wars and the rigors of the NBA. And Brent, you and I was talking about this in the back. With the lack of training camp now, with the lack of preparation, it really, really hurt the young team, because those 8 preseason games, we as veterans, we hated them because we were just trying to get through the preseason just to get to the regular season. But for a young coach with a young team, every game that you can play, especially the ones that don't count, those are invaluable games. And now that those games have been cut, now you don't have the training camp time that you used to. Young players don't know how to prepare in the summertime like veteran players. It's a tough situation for Phoenix.
Yeah, we were talking about that, Sam, even with other teams, the way they've come out of the blocks and maybe not been in the best conditioning. Even the champion Golden State Warriors, who Steve Kerr said stay away from the gym all summer long, feels like that team is out of shape. But more specifically to the Phoenix Suns, the curious part about it is that 3 games into the season, you have to think, Chris, that at some point last year when they named Earl Watson the interim coach for this ball club to be around these young guys, that they had to have been thinking after the draft that what direction this franchise needs to go in. This speaks to a lot of what Phoenix has struggled with since the departure of Steve Nash, quite frankly. And it seems like the ownership group is not quite committed to a direction yet. We know they've gotten young. There are a lot of teams that talk about going young. You can't talk about being young as an excuse. And you hired Earl Watson as a young coach, his first job in the NBA, to stand alongside these young men and to learn and grow, not only with the team, but as a coach. And 3 games in, it's very suspicious that this wouldn't have been done, Sam, before the season had begun.
The weird thing to me about the NBA is that you hire a young, inexperienced coach, but not even a lot of coaching as an assistant coach. And then you try to surround them with veteran coaches. But when you're a young coach, you're trying to establish yourself. And the young players are looking at you, and if they see the veteran coaches always in your ear telling you something, then that's who they're going to gravitate to. In the NBA, the players gravitate to the guy who's doing the talking. So if the veteran coaches who are assistants are doing the talking and teaching, that's who they gravitate to. And so as a young coach, you have to step outside that box. You have to put yourself out there and be that lead guy. But it's difficult when you're a very young coach with a very young team. And then the reporter said, being their friend. There's a fine line between being a young player's friend and being his coach.
So do you think things will change with that team, with the coaching change now?
Well, they got to. I mean, Brent and I was talking about this in the back also. Whoever takes over, they can't do the same thing. You got beat first 3 games by over 40 points a game. You can't come back to this group and say, look, we're going to continue to do the same thing offensively and defensively. It's got to change, if nothing else, just to change the outlook of how the players look at things.
And there's, without a doubt, Chris, you will see a different attentiveness from all of the players to try to prove a point that the move that the franchise made, the reason why maybe they were uninspired with their play in the first 3 games, that the coaching change now has lifted a weight for them in some way. The fact of the matter is these are kids. They don't quite know what's going on. They don't know how to do the work right now. It was disingenuous for Earl Watson to have this sort of environment with which to try to not only gain their trust, but to learn how to be a coach. It reminds me of what Jacques Vaughn went through in Orlando just a few years ago, where you have a young team and the coach is trying to establish himself. And now it's really on the players to respond to whatever it is, presumably, that Jay Triano is going to do as potentially the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. And I wish the best for Earl Watson. His future as a coach, being so young, I don't think is diminished at all by this experience. But let's face it, the Suns need some direction. The direction comes from upstairs, and you can't worry about burning bridges if you start to build some on your own. And that's where Phoenix needs to take an honest look at themselves.
Until you find a veteran player that can walk in that locker room who's established himself, the coach has got to be that leader. He's got to not only be the coach, he's got to be the leader until you find someone to teach someone in that locker room.
But 3 games into the season? Like,
yeah,
why not do it in the offseason?
But that's back to my point, Chris. It's curious about when you made the coaching change and you go through the offseason, you let Earl and his staff have the summer league, that this wasn't something that had to have been discussed at some point. It can't just be a reaction to Eric Bledsoe sending out some sort of public service announcement about him not
yeah.
being happy with the team. And one more quick point, Chris. Sam's making mention of veteran players. The veteran players on the team, they have Tyson Chandler. Jared Dudley is hurt. He's not with the ball club. One thing I think with a young team that's imperative is that the veteran guys also have to be guys that are playing and contributing. And when it's veteran guys that are on the end of the bench that look like an extension of the coaching staff, there's something that gets lost in the communication and the connection between player and coach. And so those guys, maybe their 8th or 9th or 10th year that are getting some minutes to be helpful and helpful voices, that's not something that the Phoenix Suns have.